photographers a lot of the time have the ideas, but they're too afraid to say them. Like especially new photographers, like they might think, oh, one, that's not a good idea, or the model's not gonna like think that's a good idea, and they kind of get into their heads too much about, when they're shooting, like what they can and can't do. Whereas I've got to the stage now where I'm like, not afraid to make mistakes. So, it either work or it doesn't work. So when you get past that sort of fear of that, then you can get some really good shots.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today I am joined by none other than Alex Whiteman. It sounds so bizarre full naming you, mate, because obviously we're so close. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I just really wanted to talk to you about photography, the way the fitness industry has changed, some geeky shit, because both yourself and I think definitely you are a bit more geeky than me, but it's something that we bonded on very, very early on and connected. So thank you for coming on.
I definitely out geek you.
Yeah, we'll get onto that in a little bit. So we've known each other now for coming up to, I think it was 2015 maybe, that we did our first photo shoot back in my competing days on the Margate beach.
Yeah, freezing your pants off in some really small Speedos. What color were they? Green? I think they were green.
Yeah, I think it was I'll have to dig that photo out actually, but that was an awesome shoot. I mean, the photos made it look really warm. However, it was very cold and I was just in the smallest Speedos.
Yeah, I was all right in a nice warm coat. But yeah, you were in some very small Speedos on Margate seafront for Pure Elite, I think it was.
Yeah, it was. That was awesome. So I think where we'll start is, how did you get into photography? I mean, everyone knows you as the fitness photographer guy, but where did that start for you?
Probably one of that. No, I mean, I did manage to get into the fitness industry a really good time. Kind of like by accident, really, because 2010 is when I went self-employed, and maybe after 2-ish years is when I started playing around with these models in inverted commas, and just by working with people in a sort of more, I don't know what to say, creative, but more like free kind of way, because my clients at the time were like wedding and like family portrait type people, and I just felt like I wasn't letting myself explore more creatively, not because of my customers' fault, but more me, like not maybe feeling confident with what I was doing. So I started looking online for models. There was a website called Model Mayhem, which I still believe is going. Have you heard of Model Mayhem?
Yeah, I think I had a profile on that back in the day.
Yeah. You have to be careful on there, but some fucking weirdos. But yeah, I did started meeting people off of there and started shooting. And I was going through a phase of urbexing. Do you know what an urbexer is, Dan?
I don't know. Can you please explain that?
Yeah, so an urbexer is someone that actively looks for derelict buildings.
Okay.
And urbexing is usually someone who urbexes is someone who takes their camera and they go and takes pictures of like the insides of these abandoned places, and there's some really scary places. And there was a website I used to look at. I think it was called 28 Days Later. These derelict places were everywhere. And what amazed me was actually, as I got into urbexing, was they're everywhere. You don't really notice them at first. But I've been in some really scary places in the early years. And I started taking models with me, basically, because I was looking for different kind of backdrops and things. And then just because I was shooting, I guess that kind of unusual sort of, I'm going to say, style, without realizing it, that's how I then started attracting some guys that were already in the fitness industry at the time, that were looking for portfolio stuff. And then when I started shooting those guys, that's when obviously I became aware of the fitness industry. Back then, obviously, it was all fresh and exciting on social media, all shiny and new. And then with big events like Body Power and stuff, and it becoming a very like sort of fashionable sort of thing at the time. I sort of cemented my name at the time within like a like a household of photographers, because we now like it's all kind of disbanded and it's all saturated, not just for like models and brands, but like even the photography side of stuff. Like there's a lot of people that have turned their eye to it, but I would say that a lot of people from sort of back then would know of me, and today even sort of word of mouth now I get through people that have used me before and known of me. But it's a little bit less now, trying to I don't know what the word is, like there's less pressure now to keep up that sort of social media appearance. That's what I'm trying to say. At the time it was very like, oh, I need to do this to please you, to like be friends with this person or be like super like involved to sort of get yourself noticed. Like there's a lot of fakery and stuff in the industry, with people that are like being nice to your face and then just to kind of benefit off the back of you. But that kind of pressure is it's not as I'll use the word prevalent. That's a good word. It's not as prevalent, not as prevalent now. I just, I feel like I've done it 12 years now, so there's less pressure for me now to have to try and please everybody, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose that's the same with any kind of position, isn't it? When you're building a brand or a business or everything, I think at the beginning a lot of people make the mistake of trying to people please and not finding their own niche or voice, and I think that it just comes along with the graft, and as you learn and as you build and develop that kind of industry name, you can be more selective and you can choose the areas of work that you want to do and the people that you want to work with a bit more selectively.
Yeah, I think the thing is, like, you can't please everybody. So I learned that, and I think anyone will learn that. Like when they, you start off with, you want to try and please everybody, but it's just not possible.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's how I kind of got into it. Sort of fell into it, really.
And talk to me a little bit about, because working with you personally, I have worked with a few photographers, and I think the thing that always stood out whenever I worked with you, even from before we were shooting, was I'd bounce ideas off you and you'd be like coming back to me with ideas of stuff that you wanted to do, and then also during the shoots as well, something that I really appreciated in my early days, because I just had no confidence in front of the camera, was your direction. And I think that that's something that it's very rare is not the right word, but I think that it's special the way that you do it, because it's one of those things where it's very much a case of every single shot you're like, do this, do that, try this, try that. Whereas if you're new to having a photo shoot, it's just very much like, it can be like a the rabbit in a headlights kind of situation, where you just all of a sudden you're just in front of a camera and you're like, shit, what do I do?
Yeah, there's a couple of points that I would say on that, from both a photographer's perspective and a model's perspective, because like a model, the definition of a model, I'd argue that is someone that is able to pose in front of a camera with very little direction. Actually, a model would know what to do. The difference with working in fitness is, just because someone's got a good body doesn't make them a model. So, and a lot of people will, when they see someone with a good body, just automatically think that they maybe are a model, but it's not what makes someone a model. So quite often, if you're going to, as a photographer, and this is probably a tip to any photographers out there that want to look into shooting fitness, like, don't expect them to know what they're doing, because they won't. So you have to know how to direct them. I just like directing anyway, I think, but I think I struggle anyway if I was told not to. I mean, I have photographed models that do know what they're doing, and it becomes a little bit less me um, directing and more collaborating because they almost preempt what you're about to say. Or like, I'll give you an example. Like if someone's wearing, I don't know, a hoodie like this, and I'm photographing them, rather than tell them specifically like, okay, hold your hood like this. just strangled myself. Just said, hold your hood like this. What I might say to someone who knows what they're doing is say, okay, grab your hood, or grab, and I've not told them how to do it, or because it's more like I've just prompted it, and so what they then go to do would then I can just react to it as opposed to me specifically tell them what to do, if that makes sense. So I think words are still powerful and they're very good whilst photographing, and I do and have done like workshops for not just models but also photographers, because I feel photographers a lot of the time have the ideas but they're too afraid to say them. Like they, especially new photographers, like they might think, oh, one, that's not a good idea, or the model's not gonna like think that's a good idea, and they kind of get into their heads too much about when they're shooting, like what they can and can't do. Whereas I've got to the stage now where I'm like, not afraid to make mistakes. So, it either work or it doesn't work. So when you get past that sort of fear of that, then you can get some really good shots. But I've got into this kind of habit where as I'm photographing, I'm just kind of vocabulary is just spewing out as I'm shooting, and I'm just like saying words that my brain is like just going around in a cycle. And I'm often thinking about the shot I've not yet taken, even though I'm still on this particular shot. So I'm sort of like, it's a weird loop, but just got into a habit of like, I don't know, just being intuitive with what I'm doing. But but yeah, a model just because they've got a good body or they look good doesn't make someone a model, because like modeling is everything you do every day. Like people pose all the time. Like if you were stood chatting to someone, how they're stood, they kind of relax maybe onto a leg. The trick with modeling is everything you would do normally. So people might think, oh, what do I do? And they just kind of freeze up. But the things you do every day, like you could just be kind of sat there, like just holding your arm like this, or like behind the head like this, or like hands, whatever. And people pose all the time. So it's just a case of making that natural like transition in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Did I make any sense there? That was just a complete spewing.
Yeah, no, it did. It made total sense. And I think that I'll link it into some of my clients. So we've done work together where I've had clients come to you, done transformation challenges, stuff like that. And often I've done it as a project where they're complete novices. They've not done any kind of photo shoot work, and if they have, it's just been portraits, like families, weddings, that sort of stuff. So then when they come to you, whether it's males or females, and they're in lingerie, if they're doing like a boudoir shoot, or guys swimwear, whatever it kind of stuff is, we often have worked together very closely when it comes to the prep. So we will look at the types of shoots that they want to do, and the kind of poses. So I guess where I'm going with this is, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's having their first kind of exposure to a photo shoot?
Yeah, I mean, so people often think that just because someone's got a good body, that they're the most confident person. And actually what I find in this industry is the complete opposite. So I mean, the amount of body dysmorphia is unreal. But and it's also important, from my job, my role, if I'm in a room with someone who's wearing not very much, like for me to get them looking comfortable, have to make them feel comfortable first. So otherwise it just transitions wrong it translates wrong in front of a camera. So, as a fitness photographer, when working with people that are invariably wearing not much, you have to be able to have good people skills, because you need to be able to make them feel they're not vulnerable, make them feel comfortable, etc. So for that reason, if someone felt like they'd feel more comfortable with someone else there that they know, that's something they could do. I mean, I often do encourage someone with them. Usually not their partners though. I always tell guys, like, when they say they're bringing their girlfriend along, I'm like, oh god, she's gonna sit in the back with dagger eyes, staring me in the back of their head. I can feel the heat on the back of my head. Like, what are you doing with my man? But then they're like, oh yeah, no, usually my partners are cool, so that's okay. But yeah, if you want to bring a friend, your mum, I've had people bring their mums. That's interesting. But yeah, bring someone that you're comfortable with, and like you did with the groups and stuff. Like, that's often quite a good way, maybe, to sort of dip your toe into it, because you're all in the same boat. I think this industry, as competitive as it is, when you get into like sort of competition side of things, but you're in the same boat, so you're all like got things to relate to and talk about stuff. So I think that's probably like one thing I would defo recommend for someone new, but also, talking with the photographers beforehand, getting a feel for what they're like. Don't be afraid to tell them what you're after. I mean, photographers would ask that anyway. They should do. I mean, there is a whole safety aspect with online as well. Like, if someone approaches you, I've had so many people pretend to be me, and like there was an incident recently, not a couple of years ago. I say recently. I feel like time has just disappeared. Before lockdown and stuff, there was a photographer that was like using my name to get girls to go to like a certain location, and had to get the police involved and everything. So just make sure you're always talking, like, especially online, like, yeah, and that's also comes into the sort of thing of like bringing a friend as well. Like, just make sure you're always careful online, both photographer and model.
And I also get my clients to kind of have a little look at the photographer's work, make sure they're comfortable with that kind of work as well, because with females specific, or males, I suppose, actually, so it doesn't really make a difference. I want to make sure that they're comfortable. If their main style is kind of like implied nudes or boudoir, are they comfortable with that, or do they just want to do somewhere? Have they established kind of that boundary beforehand? Because if they get to a shoot, then often, sometimes they might not have the confidence to say, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I know that my profile is quite intimidating, really, and actually, I'm very conscious of, the styles of work. I mean, because I do all kinds of things, as we know, like, I'll do nudes, implied nudes, I'll do, the fitness stuff, whatever, and I try to do a bit of a mixture on my Instagram. But people always look at what they want to look at. So I do shoot women, for example, right? And I do post women, and I always get women messaging me saying, do you photograph women? I'm like, yeah, they're in there, but you're just probably only looking at what you want to look at. But I have made another profile actually that is more targeted at women, because people look for, I don't know, things that go through people's minds are like all strange. I can't keep up with it, but it's difficult trying to. Again, it goes back to that whole thing of trying to please everybody. So I'm comfortable in sort of styles I do, and what I am aware of actually is when people do message me, when people do actually get to the point of approaching me, it's usually actually probably taken them months to do so, because people they look at stuff and they'll be like, oh, I don't look like that person, and they feel intimidated, and eventually, either through the encouragement of people like yourself, when they got their coach or whatever, they eventually do approach people. But even like the most people that you think look amazing in their head, they don't see it. So going back to that body dysmorphia thing, but
Mhm.
yeah, it takes people a while to pluck up the courage. And all I do say to people is like, people can look bigger, more ripped, and whatever in a picture due to
Yeah.
lighting and angles and stuff.
Yeah.
So I am very much aware of how intimidating, my profile can be to people when they're first looking. But
The fitness industry is the funniest. Well, it's not funny, but body dysmorphia, like speaking from my own personal experience of it, like I remember when I was at my absolute leanest, and I think we did a photo shoot that year as well. It was because it was when I won the Miami Pro. And I remember waking up that morning after the competition, and I was definitely like, at the time, I was like, man, like, even though I just won the competition, I was like, don't know if I want to have a photo shoot because I was like, I do not feel like I'm lean enough at the moment. And then looking back, like, it's just crazy. Like, there was no fat to come off me.
yeah, I mean, I always tell people, like, I've had examples where like a brand, let's say a swimwear brand, has messaged me saying they're looking for some guys. I actually had There was one year when I got flown to Barcelona and had to do a campaign shoot for a swimwear brand,
Mhm.
and they were also keen about flying two other guys out with me. And I remember putting a post saying, looking for some guys, like for a swimwear shoot, Barcelona, expenses paid, get paid, really good opportunity. And most of the replies I got back from people were, "Oh, I'm not in shape right now." And the shoot did go ahead, and I had two guys come with me, but a lot of guys shot themselves in the foot because they were thinking, and these were probably people that have competed actually, because they got to a level where they competed and they don't see any other version of themselves as good enough. And when I get an opportunity to talk to people like that, I say to them, look, just remember that how you are on stage is one version of you. That's just one facet of you. It's not the best version. It's not the worst version. It's just one version of you. So, um, but people, yeah, they think like, well, if I'm not like that, then there's no point. But I understand about raising the bar for competitions and whatever. But what we have to remember is have some kind of like grasp of reality.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen people sadly when they compete, it's ruined their relationship with food, themselves, other people, and yeah, it's definitely a mental battle as much as it is physical. But um,
100%.
but yeah, I've had people basically lose out on opportunities because of that. But
It's so interesting because I definitely, when I was competing, my identity, my whole basis of worth and self was, I'm a competitive fitness model. And that was my like kind of identity. And then it took me a while to get out of that. After I competed for the 3-4 years that I did, the best version of me was, on stage. That was it. So there was no way I was going to do a photo shoot. I remember at times as well, even training in the gym, like when I wasn't in shape, like I was still for like the average person in very good shape looking back. But back then, there was no way I was like going to be training in a vest, or there was no way I was going to be getting like the skin out. I would not have had a photo taken topless. And yeah, I think it's just very interesting. I think it's something that in the fitness industry or the competing side of things, we don't really touch on because it's not the healthiest of things, and you can compete in a healthy way as long as you don't put your whole worth and self-identity onto the fact that you are that shredded individual on stage for that 10 minutes that you're on stage for. As you say, that's just one part of your identity, whereas
yeah,
I definitely lost myself in that process.
from an outside perspective as well, like someone that say doesn't compete, who sees pictures of someone and they don't understand the whole process and the mental battle anyway. But people assume that that person's always in that shape. I mean, there are some unusual freaks out there that like being in
Yeah.
that kind of leanness all the time, but it's not healthy if you look at the bigger picture.
Mhm.
Um, But yeah, there are people that just assume that is how they are all the time. But even from my own like perspective, like it's completely ruined my own like opinion on myself. Like I won't take my top off on a beach or whatever because of what I see every day probably. And I mean, I am trying to like get back into gym and stuff, but even with my own like sort of gym when I was really into it at one point. But I think actually working in this industry is the reason why it's made me lose motivation with it, which is weird. But
this is the problem. So I was reading a book not too long ago, Atomic Habits. If you've not read it, read it. It's a really good book, and I think that it's basically explained within the fact of the Goldilocks principle. So if a goal is too hard, we're not motivated. We lose motivation. If a goal's too easy, it's the same thing. Like it's, we don't have to put any effort in. It doesn't interest us. So we have to find that kind of sweet spot. And I think the problem is within the fitness industry, especially, the people that you work with and, the images that you're exposed to, the people that you're exposed to on a regular basis, everybody is posting I'll do air quotes for people listening, their best version of themselves all the time, the highlight reel. And we're comparing ourselves to that, which we also equally know that it is the angles, it's the good lighting.
Yeah, I know it's a false sense of, like, everything I see every day is a false sense of reality. But it's become my normal, if that makes sense. So, and like it even affects my dating life because people approach me and don't think I'll be interested in them because I don't look like the people I'm working with. I'm like, just because I photograph it doesn't mean that's what I'm looking for. But I mean, the reason why I photograph fitness, I mean, it's because I actually really like the architecture of the body. And, it goes back to sort of art, really, but the male body has more structure to it than the female body, like in terms of lines, etc. I like working with females as well. Probably, actually, prefer working with females in a lot of ways because you can be a lot more. I don't know what the word is. I just like some of. Well, I was going to say like be more free with poses, but that's not true either because I don't think what a man can do and what a female can do is like there's not much difference. So I don't know what it is, but I think actually. Like with fitness, like it's all about that kind of hard image, which obviously I'll do with females. But when I do something like a wedding, for example, when the emphasis is on the bride, what I like about that is it's the complete opposite because it's more that kind of softer image. So like it gives me a little break from that hard stuff. That makes sense. But yeah, completely full sense of reality. So,
I think it's so interesting because I think there's going to be like a pendulum at some point because at the moment, the social media world is so kind of, it can be used for great things, but it depends on how you use social media. And it can also be a terrible place. If you're looking at social media as a comparison, you're constantly looking at other people that are very successful, very wealthy on the surface, because it could all be bullshit as well. Like, luckily people like yourself and I who are in the social media game and know people that are, very, very high in terms of numbers of following, know what goes on behind the scenes. We know that some people are renting,
it's a force, absolute. Yeah. And actually people always talk about how females like get self-conscious and stuff from magazines and things, but I think men are just as bad, if not worse. But the trouble is with men is they don't tend to vocalize the sort of issues that they have with stuff like that. But it's what we know. Well, when you're involved in it all, you do know. But like, it is worrying for people that like young people who see all these influencers and this kind of lifestyle or whatever. Or, it's definitely you have to keep your wits about you.
Definitely. I think even stuff like, not even just social media now, like the whole body image of a man has changed massively. Like, look, 10-15 years ago, when I first got into the fitness industry and into training, you know, the guys, it was very much separate. There was bodybuilding, and that was very, very niche. And then there was, like, you know, you kind of men's fitness, men's health sort of, like, fitness sort of model type look. But now everyone's getting bigger. You know,
well, that's actually, that's why the fitness industry got a kick up the bum, was because like TV shows and stuff that were having these guys on TV that were in this sort of more sort of fitness model kind of shape, and it made guys be like, oh, I want to look like that. And then because traditionally, like, it used to, like, bodybuilding, to compete, that was all there was, like, you know, classic bodybuilding, whatever. But because there became like this popular sort of thing of, like, all these guys on TV and stuff, basically the shows opened up their platforms to allow that type of physique, and that's when a lot of people got involved, because it was more of an obtainable physique for a lot of people. So, and I think it's because of that, the reason why, like, the whole industry got going, really, because
I mean, look
at
when they introduced men's physique into the bodybuilding competitions, and then look at the growth of those boys. Like, they started off very much beach body looking, and now they're like massive wham guys.
Yeah.
In, like, shorts. Some of them are bigger than the bodybuilders. Like, it's mental how much they've grown and how much that industry thing has changed. But even films, like, look at the superhero films. Like, you've got celebrities that are jacked now. So in fact, it's interesting, because that was the one thing that I was very inspired by fitness models. But I think it was either the first Captain America film or the Thor.
Yeah.
And I remember going into seeing that and thinking, yeah, I'm gonna look like that. That was my thing, and I came out.
Aren't they, like, quite enhanced on, like, TV and stuff with the suits and things? I mean, they obviously would have trained for the role. Do you know, being as much of a nerd as I am, I don't actually. I'm not massively into the Marvel films. It's shocking, isn't it? I just haven't really.
Sorry, Alex. I'm gonna hang up now.
I don't understand. I don't understand.
Yeah, no, and I think that obviously makes a massive difference as well. But again, lighting, editing, all that sort of stuff. And I just think it's interesting how that's changed, because I do think that we're in that kind of that realm that females faced, 10, 15 years ago, where everyone was super, super skinny, and it was the opposite for females, and they faced that kind of mental health challenge of that. I think the guys are going through something similar, because the amount of people that train now, which is good on one hand, but if they're kind of not doing things healthily, if they're jumping into shortcuts, doing the wrong things, getting into peds, those sorts of things early doors, it can be very damaging mentally and physically.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is, like, I mean, with my Instagram particularly, due to the fact of what I'm doing and who I follow, like, every single thing that I see on my home page are these, like, ridiculous physiques and stuff, and I'm just like, so it is, yeah. People, like, young minds are being brainwashed, or whatever the word is, with, like, all of this imagery. So it's difficult not to feel like, what's wrong with me, sort of, why can't I be like that, or feel under pressure, to peer pressure in a way, to conform.
Yeah, and also as well, those images tend to do very well on social media. So that kind of subliminally sends the message that that's what everybody wants. And really, it isn't. I got into the gym, I'll be honest. When I was 16, I was very skinny, had no confidence, and I just basically wanted to get more girls. That was my initial driver. I wanted to have more motivation, and obviously it's changed now massively, and I do it for my own personal reasons, my development, but well, to be honest, girls don't care. They don't give a shit. Like, that's the funny thing. Like, I remember when I was competing and I was really lean and had abs, and like so many girls just didn't like that look, but my inbox was just full of men, which either gay men or men that were like, how do I get shredded like you, or how do I grow my biceps like you? So it kind of it's funny. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day actually about the male perception of what is wanted versus what is actually wanted, and girls just don't care about that. So behind you right now, for anyone just listening, Alex has a big Spartan helmet, and that sounded like a terrible euphemism. I did actually.
I have 5 of them.
Yeah, so Alex is very interested in history. He's a massive nerd. He's a big geek. I'm not really sure what the difference between nerd and geek is, but we'll go with both of those descriptions of you. How's being a geek changed the way that you photograph other people?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been into like fantasy and stuff. For me, it's a form of escapism, which I guess for a lot of people that go to the gym for them is a form of escapism.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I like making people look like they've stepped out of some kind of fiction novel.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't have to be as like obvious as literally someone wearing some kind of fantasy outfit. It could be very like subconsciously, like beneath the layers of even just a simple picture of them just kind of stood there, not really holding much in the way of props or whatever, just the way they kind of like stood is very sort of like commanding, and has that sort of powerful godlike thing. So it doesn't have to be as like obvious as like slap bam in your face, here's a person wearing I know Spartan outfit or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it can just be less than that. So for me, that's always going on the back of my mind because that's what I'm into. So it just kind of like translates. I've used that word a lot today. Translates. It translates across. Yeah, it translates across without me even sort of thinking about it. I mean, even with weddings as well. Like everyone wants their fairy tale wedding.
Mm-hmm.
So it all links together really with whatever it is I'm doing, whether it be fitness, more fashion stuff, weddings, whatever. Like it all has that undertone of me being a nerd and liking sort of fantasy stuff, fiction, whatever.
Let's actually put some labels on that. So Alex, whenever he comes to see me, whenever we spend any time together, he essentially bullies me into playing card games, Magic.
Well, that's not true, but I took the opportunity when you had a broken leg because I knew you can't run away.
Literally, I was in bed after I'd broken my leg. It was a couple of weeks after, wasn't it? And my leg had just, was it when it was infected or afterwards? I can't remember.
I don't care. All I knew is that you couldn't move.
Literally, at that point, Alex brought down a big case of cards, got them out. Yeah. And I had no idea. The problem is I'm a very, very addicted? No. I have a
personality.
Addictive personality, yeah. So if Alex introduces me to things like this, I'm on board with it, but I have to keep 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out the door, because otherwise I just end up fully deep diving in on it as well. So for a time as well, you were like real crazy on Warhammer.
Yeah, I mean, before lockdown, I was pretty much. I mean, I live near Warhammer World, which is the world headquarters for Warhammer. And when I moved here, that's not why I moved here. But ever since, I was like, wow, I can never move away.
And now everyone understands how much of a geek you are.
Wait, Dan, do you know that Henry Cavill was there recently?
No.
Yeah, he was at Warhammer World because he plays Warhammer.
Did you go?
I was doing something else at the time. I think I was I was actually in Nottingham, but I was at an escape room. But I completely missed Henry.
He is king of the geeks. Like he plays.
I would have gone and proclaimed my love to him. Yeah.
He's absolute geek. Like you wouldn't expect it, but he builds his own computers, plays Warhammer. Like even like on set on The Witcher, he's renowned for knowing more than some of the
Yeah,
costume people and stuff
yeah.
like that. It's like, no, we should do it like this.
I think that's cool that there's someone, one who looks like the way he does, but also, and also being in the public eye. But it's cool that someone out there like that is a sort of role model in a way to make it cool. Because I remember being at school, and I'm sure this is the case for everybody, but I wish I could go back to school with the attitude that I have now, because I'd just be like, fuck you, fuck you.
Yeah.
Because I used to get bullied loads for being a nerd, and I remember like being really like upset about being called a geek and stuff. But now I just embraced it. I mean, I don't know what I'd do if I wasn't one. My life would be so fucking boring. I can't understand how anyone can like.
Everyone has different interests, I guess, don't they? But mine and yours are very similar. So I would also put myself in the undercover geek category. Yeah. So I think you're right. It is really cool that someone like that is so successful, so in the public eye, and kind of a role model to people that to say that it is okay. Because go back 10, 15 years or 20 years ago, I mean, probably longer for when you were in school, but we've got back then you'd have been like, everyone was saying that computer games, like, it was a waste of time, there was no future in it. But look at it now, like, if you're a Twitch streamer, you can make a serious living. If you're a YouTube gamer, you can make a serious living. Like, or even a competitive gamer, like, there's so much out there. And I think that's something that we're so fortunate in our current time of living, that there's so much possibility, and we can do, like, whatever your interest is, you can make a living off it.
Yeah, I mean, also parallel to that, what we were talking about a minute ago, like, being a influencer was never a job. People, I mean, it is like kind of smokes and mirrors for a lot of people, but there are people I know who do generally make a living out of being an influencer. But yeah, even that kind of job was non-existent until recent events. But
talking of influencing, Alex, before I lose that train of thought, you've got a massive following on Facebook. How did that come about?
Well, back then,
in the Facebook days,
social media was not as restricted in terms of like algorithms, engagement, and all that rubbish, which I still don't fully understand. But back then, like, there was no, like, Facebook didn't monopolize on reach and things. And basically, I probably had I think I was on like 3,000 and something followers for a good couple of years, and it was just really slow. And then I photographed a guy that had 1 million followers from America, and he shared my post. And then I went up to 15,000 followers in a matter of hours. And then over the course of like the next year, I grew to about 1 million followers off of that one post, because back then reach was not restricted like it is now. So that's why. But
it's so crazy how much social media has changed. It is so weird when you think about it, because like even now, like, Facebook has become like this kind of graveyard of, like, you only really use it for family, maybe a couple of posts. I mean, I still use it for my business, but personally, everybody's using either Instagram, TikTok.
You say that, but Facebook, I mean, I've been a couple of instances like recently where I have used it for stuff, and it does work. Like, we say it's dead, but I don't know if I fully agree with that. But there are a lot of, obviously, other platforms that people go to now. But yeah, I wouldn't write off Facebook, actually. But yeah, it has a lot of the thing that I haven't kept up with is I haven't got a Snapchat. Like, people today message like, "What's your Snapchat?" I'm like, I don't have one. I'm too old for that.
Do you know what? I tried it for a long time, and then as soon as Instagram brought out their stories feature, I was like, yeah, I'm done with this. Like, I do enough social media. I don't want to be posting on like another social media as well.
Yeah.
But I have noticed there is a different set of people. So like every now and then I will go on Snapchat and I'll flick through the stories. But what I find is some of the people that I'm following on Instagram don't post their stories on Instagram, but they do post a lot on their Snapchat. So there's almost like a different way of using it. And I just, yeah, to be honest, I do enough social media. I don't want to do another one. So I agree with you.
Yeah. It's I mean, people say, oh yeah, because people can't screenshot stuff. I'm like, well, they can. But they say, oh yeah, but let me. It will tell me that they have. I was like, well, if they're gonna do it, they're gonna do it. I don't understand.
It's too late. Once it's been screenshot, it doesn't matter if they've told you. Like, it's done.
Yeah, I don't get it. But also, I think it kind of goes against my belief in what I'm doing photo wise, because for me, photos are memories, and they're like, you know, the whole idea of Snapchat is it's in the moment, fleeting, and it's gone. And for me, it's like, oh, that's not why I like photography. So
yeah,
but people just use it to send nudes, don't they? That's what they use it for.
Yeah, pretty much. But what we've learned here today is don't use Snapchat over the age of about 25, I think.
Yeah. It's like a gauntlet of I get I still like I always forget which color means what. And before I know it, I've opened up something horrendous. I'm like, it's like a gauntlet of nudes. So,
brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. All right, so let's talk about, I know that you're really, really passionate about Dungeons and Dragons, which I rinse you about on a regular basis, but I actually love it. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, I think it's really cool, but it is very, very geeky.
Yeah. I mean, when you mention Dungeons and Dragons to people, like the first thing they probably think of is like, oh, isn't that the thing off of I forgot the name of the program.
Big Bang Theory.
No, well, that as well. The Strange Things.
Oh,
Stranger
Alex,
Things.
you're going to force me to admit something on the podcast. I've not seen it yet. I haven't seen any of them.
Oh, what? I'm going to hang up now. Yeah. So yeah, people recognize it from those like things, but yeah, it's actually I got into it around lockdown actually, and that's kind of when my Warhammer like phase has been halted because a lot's changed like in that game anyway. But yeah, D&D's like been very social actually over those 2 years where we've not been able to be social as much, but because it's basically role playing and like talking with people on whatever. But yeah, and I like telling stories, so I also do the dungeon mastering for some groups. So I've created like a whole world, and I actually counted up the word count on my world that I've created so far, and I've written about 160,000 words.
That's a book.
Yeah, that's how in depth my world has become. Like at the moment,
Alex, explain this. Even I don't understand this. So the podcast listeners are just going to be like, "That's way above me. I don't get it." So what exactly is a dungeon master?
So a dungeon master is basically the games master. So they are in charge of your fate. Basically, they're telling a story. So you got the players, and they're role playing as certain characters.
Yeah.
Like the easiest way to explain it is like Lord of the Rings, right? So, someone might be playing like an elf, someone playing a dwarf or whatever. There's different races and classes. Like you could be a wizard, you could be a fighter, you could be sorcerer, you could be all kinds of different things. And the dungeon master is none of those things, but they're basically keeping everyone in check, and they throw encounters at them and put them into situations which question their moral choices. And you're basically playing God in a way. And I think I prefer playing as dungeon master than the actual player. But
so how do you, I don't understand how that works. So can you play and be the dungeon master?
Well, you have what's called as NPCs, which is a non-player character. So within my world, I've obviously got like in loads of NPCs. You know,
Uh-huh.
it could be a simple farmer, or it
Yeah.
could be like the big bad evil wizard or whatever, or
Uh-huh.
dragons or whatever. So I'm in control of all of those creatures and people.
Yeah.
So, but the
But you
reason why it doesn't work if you were like when you've got players, you don't want to help them too much. Like if they're trying to solve a puzzle, for example, and one of my NPCs is in the room with them,
yeah.
obviously I know the answers, so I can't have my NPC like tell them what to do. So
Right.
so you have to sort of work around it, but yeah, it doesn't really work you playing and being a dungeon master at the same time in your own game, because you know what's happening basically. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you're the
So
author of the book.
so you are like just the extra characters essentially that come into that game.
Yeah, but the players, like, I mean, there are like when you play Dungeons and Dragons, there are modules and pre-released material that you can play from. So
Mhm.
like there are books that your dungeon master could literally read a campaign with you
Yeah.
and play it through. But I've homebrewed my own world, so I've got like my own countries and continents and towns and cities
Mhm.
but it's been a massive 2-year project so far. Um, and the players that play in my games are the ones in a way that create my world, because you know, as a dungeon master, it's impossible for me to have every single like backstory of all these places and people. Um, you can make a skeleton of it,
Mhm.
and then basically your players fill it in with what they're role playing. So
So is it
it's
like
interesting.
is it I don't really know, but is it a multiple like choice situation where you could solve things in different ways, or is it just kind of they need to defeat this thing, then the next thing is that, and then that, and kind of
Yeah, so there's usually, I mean, in my campaign I'm running at the minute, like there is an overarching story. Like like the format of Dungeons and Dragons is very similar to, I mean, a lot of computer games are based off of Dungeons and Dragons, to be honest. Like when you play, I'm trying to think of an example, but when you play like these role playing games, they're usually built off of Dungeons and Dragons. So
Mhm.
there is an overarching story,
Yeah.
but my players will all have their own characters and their own backstories. So,
Mhm.
as a dungeon master, not only am I telling the main story, but I'm also telling their stories as well. So,
Mhm.
to keep them happy, and I try to like integrate it with the actual main story. Um,
Mhm.
but what I've tried to do with my campaign is not make it so linear. It's like an open world scenario. So you know, there's side quests and things, and they don't have to follow the main story. Similarly, they could just completely fuck it up. So it's like the choices they make are their own. So you know, I put people into like these moral dilemmas, and how they act um, is storytelling. So, but they're playing their own characters, so they're trying to keep true to what their characters' backstories are. So, like, if someone's they're not role playing as them, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
let's say someone was like quite confident in life, they might be playing someone who isn't in the game. So you're role playing is the word.
Mhm. I would be terrible at this game, I think, Alex, because I'm one of those players on Xbox that if I'm playing like a role playing game, I like, nah, fuck the side quests. I'm going straight for the main missions and
Yeah.
then get fucked up by the boss because I'm like, oh, well, I needed that piece of
So
art or I
uh,
needed that sword to go and
yeah,
kill that thing.
my players, um, I always test my players, particularly from the beginning. And my group I have currently have learned to question everything that I put in front of them now. I've turned them into nervous wrecks. Like one example, they were going through like a cave, and I had a huge gem. Like I kept describing it as if you see this massive, shiny, wonderful gem, like kind of stood like on this kind of statue. And to
Yeah.
get to it wasn't easy because it was in the middle of like a lava sort of river, but it was just sat there, and they were making their way through the cave, like completely not looking for this gem. But I was like, here's this huge gem. My goodness, it's amazing. Someone actually died trying to get to it because when they retrieved it, it triggered like this huge fire elemental creature that basically was like giving me my gem back. You know, like in Aladdin when the monkey or he takes the that gem inside the Cave of Wonders. Have you seen Aladdin?
Yeah. Have I seen Aladdin? Yes.
Well, we don't know, millennials. So it was kind of like that. So I was like, here's this very valuable gem. Instead of just passing it by, one of my players died because and they lost the gem in the end because it fell into lava. But
do you respawn then, or is that it, game over for that person?
It's a difficult character death because a lot of time has been invested into their player characters. And I always, whenever I start a group off in Dungeons and Dragons, you always have like what's called a session zeros, where you chat to everyone about what to expect in the game, possibly what people are into, what they're not into, because there are themes that come up, like adult themes, where you have to make sure people are like sane of mind. You want to make sure it's not going to trigger some kind of like deep rooted fear or whatever, or upset someone. Like because the possibilities are endless. So I always chat with players before a game to work out what they are okay with. But I also mentioned about character death because I don't want people to feel despondent. That's a good word. About not making another character. So yeah, you basically make a new character. If you're not enjoying the campaign and you want to bow out, then that's cool. But if you want to stay in, then yeah, you make a new one, basically.
Is that online or in person? What is it, like a board game or what?
So traditionally, it's all theatre of the mind, which means you just use your imaginations, and you do it in person around a table. So you've got a dungeon master. They usually got a screen, so you can't see what they're rolling and looking at behind the screen, because there are dice involved. Because you roll dice for like saving throws and attack throws and skill checks and stuff like that. So there is like a luck based element to it, because you have to roll dice. But especially with like lockdown and stuff, I sort of looked at the online sort of side of things. And I don't know what I actually prefer. Like obviously in person it's nice, but I do like the visual aspects. So I like making maps and stuff. So there's a website I make maps on, and like making tokens. I'm quite a visual person anyway, like with photography. So I do like that aspect. But when you play in person, you it's not a board game, but you do, if you want, for combat particularly, because there are rules with combat, like how far away you are from someone and stuff. You do get like sort of gridded sort of maps where you can place characters on. So because everything is measured in feet and stuff on in D&D. So it's not a board game, but there are tools to use if a DM wanted. Like there's different styles of DMing. Like you could just leave it all up to imagination. You could have visuals. But particularly with like restrictions and things, and with people like living in all areas of the country, I find online is quite easy, really, like people's schedules, basically.
Yeah. I think lockdown was kind of awesome for that as well. Like it managed to bring lots of people closer in ways that it didn't before, and businesses have changed. Like luckily, people that were able to work throughout it made adjustments, and they went online, or social stuff became Zoom quiz nights, and the Zoom D&D. I'm sure whatever it is, we're recording the podcast now on Zoom and stuff like that. So I think it's been really good, and the idea of this podcast stemmed from the lockdown, because I was just in a situation where I was at home. I was working from home on my laptop. I wasn't going out. I wasn't going to the gym. Obviously, no one was, but I wanted to just have conversations. Like it was just almost out of desperation, of lack of socialization, that I thought, you know what, I'm going to start a podcast. And, that's where this stemmed from. So I think it's been obviously terrible in a lot of ways, but really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. I mean, I started off doing D&D the end of 2019. Oh no, I can't remember the first. I think it was like January. The first was like probably the first session I ever had in person with some of my friends. And then obviously lockdown happened, and then it was forced to kind of move online. But it was good way of like keeping social. So yeah, I've kept on with it, obviously. And the good thing about it for anyone who's thinking of starting if I've managed to convince anyone about how awesome it is, it's actually very inexpensive because it's usually your imagination. So, like, with Warhammer, it was so expensive. I mean, I've spent so much money on these bits of cardboard.
Alex is holding up a magic card there, by the way.
Yeah, I am. But like, in comparison, D&D is like not expensive whatsoever. I mean, you can buy books and things, but most sources are online anyway. If you want to like get into how to make a character and whatever. But if you're looking to get into D&D, all you got to do is just find a group. There's actually some groups on Facebook, like for beginners and stuff. You can find a DM. You can get into a group and make sure that you gel with the group. Because actually, the thing I found quite interesting about D&D psychologically is a lot of the time, like, it's better to play with people right? So the people that I played start off with are people that I knew through Warhammer and stuff like that. So I knew them in person, and we know that we all get on.
Yeah.
So with online, what's been interesting is obviously you meeting with people that you've not met before, and you don't know what they're like, same in mind. But the strange thing is sometimes people, without realizing it, bring their own personal issues through into their online characters. Does that make sense? So although you're role playing as someone else, it's quite interesting how sometimes people bring forward these sort of inner them, and it sometimes obviously doesn't work with chemistry. So I found that very interesting because it's all about people skills. I mean, I think I'm good at that anyway, but trying to keep a group together. But yeah, there is that. So yeah, when you're looking for groups online, obviously you just want to make sure that you're with the same sort of like-minded people.
There's a video that it just reminded me of. I would so be. Have you remember the video that there was a guy? I'm sure it was World of Warcraft. They were having a meeting into this boss, and one of the guys just runs in and goes, "Leroy Jenkins," and just instantly gets everybody killed, and they just lose their shit. If there is a character or a person that would describe me and best fit me in a game like that, that is definitely me. I'd be like, fuck all this tactics, I'm off. See you later, boys.
Get everyone killed.
Yeah. I planned it for like 3-4 hours, so obviously did not go down well at all. Alex, it's been amazing having you on. What's next for you?
What's next? In terms of like work or?
Well, not today. I just mean like in general, like work-wise, like what you got cooking in the background.
Well, work-wise, I've actually got. It's been in the making for like 2 years, but I've got a platform being built to help with making money without doing much, like a social media platform, and obviously continuing to get work and things, which is okay. And then in the personal side of stuff, just trying to like save money as well, because I don't know when I would move, but I'd quite like to at some point. Well, I'm 36 this year, but before I'm sort of 40 in my mind of like sort of moving around, and yeah, just continuing to enjoy doing the things I enjoy doing, and like hobbies and stuff. I think that's mostly the. My brother's also got like his niece, well, his daughter, my niece. So things like that, family wise. So yeah, I think don't know if that's exciting enough for you, but just keep doing what I enjoy doing, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there anything else that we haven't mentioned today that you want to quickly talk about?
I feel like I've managed to talk about all the nerdy shit I like and how I got into photography. But I think the main I like talking about stuff I'm passionate about. So if anyone's listening to this that, well, either a photographer or model or someone who's thinking of getting into that D&D, etc., or whatever, like I'm happy talking about things that I like doing. So just drop me a message, I guess.
And that's a good point. Where can people find more about you?
So Instagram's probably like the best place, really, for my work, and also slide into my DMs. But which is
Wait, that sounds so seedy. Then
yeah, I meant it. Slide into my DMs. Alex Whiteman Photography is me, okay. But obviously spelled correctly. And yeah, it's probably the best place, really, to message me.
All right, wicked. I'll put that in the little description box for the podcast. Alex, mate, thank you so much for coming on. We'll definitely have you back on. We'll talk more geeky shit, and we'll go into more detail. Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about Pokemon, so that can be next time.
Yeah, I mean,
my favorite Pokemon is Gengar. Just FYI.
Ghost type.
Gengar, yeah.
Oof. Mine's Mewtwo. I'm going to go stereotypical, old school, original 151 release. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Alex, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on.
It's okay.
We'll see you soon.
Yeah.